The Concacaf Champions Cup returns. We review our unanswered questions for the USL, and is James Rodriguez a good fit for Minnesota? That and much more here on Wednesday's edition of Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. You found your way to Morning Kickaround, the show where we dot the map of the ever-changing American soccer landscape. How you doing? My name is Robert Kerr, local soccer guy, and to my side, as always, radio soccer guy, Jason Davis. How you feeling?
Good. Concacaf Champions Cup is back, as you said at the top of the show, and that was interesting last night. San Diego making a statement. I'm sure we'll talk about this with John Arnold, and he'll give us a lay of the land for CONCACAF questions. Very interesting stuff happening around USL, and I think we're going to talk about some questions that maybe have answers and maybe some that don't have answers yet.
Yeah, that's right. Looking forward to our conversation with John Arnold. Have enjoyed his Substack, Getting CONCACAF, for quite some time. Before we get to the meat and potatoes of today's show, though, we do have the official announcement, Kickathon 2026, our first marathon show. We're going to have fun, games, guests, and some fundraising to make 2026 the best year yet, and just broaden out and lay out a marker for what we can accomplish this year.
Yeah, you can see it, just a little bit of a tease. We do have some guests that are lined up. We want to be careful about promising anything until those things are absolutely 100% locked down. But I think we're going to have some very cool people come on that show through the couple of hours that will be on the air. As we have told you before, in order for this show to grow, in order for it to become even better at covering parts of American soccer that aren't covered enough. And I've run into a bunch of people that have reached out to me recently via various social networks to say, really like what you're doing, really enjoying Morning Kickaround. And I'm excited for that. It means we're finding an audience. Obviously, all you guys, and shout out to all of our ultras here this morning, who are already, very much committed to this. But we need to grow it, and maybe the Kickathon can help us with that. We do have, Rob and I can't say a lot yet because no contracts are signed, anything of that nature. But we do have a plan for a live show that may come together on the road in 2020, very soon in 2026. I'm getting giddy over here, Rob. I'm really excited for this. Maybe the Kickathon is our launch into these things.
Yes, excited for February 23rd, 2026. That is the date for Kickathon.
Wait, did we change the date?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if that's the right date. Oh, my goodness.
Let's take it off the screen because I think I didn't change the date, Rob. You've caught something. I'll fix it. You just Pat, this is live stuff.
It's a live show. This is a grassroots media production. It is actually what it says on the screen here, February 18th. So it is 2 weeks from today, Kickathon 2026. Our goal is 3 hours of, like I said, guests, games, and fun, and some fundraising. And I think we're going to have maybe producer Jenny put some games in the mix, some special guests have a couple ideas as well. So we'll have maybe an Ask Us Anything. We get to know the hosts a little bit better, but we also get to dip into a lot of the subjects that we cover here on the show with, obviously, we cover local stuff. We cover the USL. A lot of folks say, why do you guys cover USL so much? Well, with the theme of our show, dotting the map, I don't know if there's anyone else dotting the map at such a feverish pace or at an entertaining rate than the USL. But there it is on the screen. Should we clip that? February 18th, Kickathon 2026. Jason, Robert, guests, and you guys. And we are, trying to set the stage for what could be an amazing 2026. There has been talks, some ultra-led conversations about maybe an Ultra Fest, but the plans to maybe do an official fly-out live shows possibility. But what we were able to put together here on February 18th with Kickathon 2026 could really open the doors for planning our summer and how we can best, detail our storylines that we're covering even better so with a little bit more resources at our disposal.
Yeah, I like how our now that it's fixed and it says the correct information, I like how our poster says American soccer. Just American soccer. That's what it's all about, baby. Let's go.
Yes, Kickathon 2026, February 18th, 2 weeks from today. Put that on your calendars and tell your friends, a special event right here on the show. On today's episode, we do have John Arnold talking Concacaf Champions Cup. We're going to dip into the James Rodriguez unanswered questions of USL's big plans and touch off on today's labor negotiations. They're meeting once again. Before we get to that, we are a podcast as well as a YouTube channel. So if you prefer to consume us on your favorite podcast platform, we are available there. Support us on social media. We're growing on all the different platforms. And if you didn't know already, you haven't already hit the follow button there at Kickaround on all the social media platforms. And if you'd like to write us a note, if you have a big question, the big hold up.
Yeah, I'd like to pause on the podcast thing because we have heard from several people. I don't watch the show live on YouTube. It doesn't really fit my schedule. So I listen to the podcast. There are some people that choose to interact with the show that way. All I would ask is if you listen to the podcast, give us a rating and a review wherever you listen to it, preferably on Apple Podcasts, but do that wherever you get the podcast to help us out to reach more people. Continue, Rob.
Yes, and then you put up the email address on screen there for a minute. Bring that back up because that's a good one. We've got some great notes. A lot of people have a lot of like kind of white paper sort of things and their thoughts on American soccer, pro-rel or otherwise, and then business inquiries. That's the best way to get a hold of us if you have any sort of business inquiries here. And so as we go during the show, feel free to become a member, become a donator with a super thanks. And one of the perks of becoming a member is getting your commentary on screen and becoming an active part of this conversation here. I'm going to break a rule about putting non-members on the screen here because we have a Cosmos supporter here. A show at Hinchcliffe when? All right, so this is where you need to do your own campaigning to try to put some pressure on that front office to get your guys out there.
Absolutely. Lobby the Cosmos to bring us out. You know, we're partnered with the Cosmos because we're doing Countdown to Kickoff with them next episode Friday. Next episode of Countdown to Kickoff, New York Cosmos on Friday. So look out for that. Yeah,
look out for that. I think that just about does it. Let's get to the show, Jason.
Let's go.
All right, Long Balls here on Wednesday's edition of Morning Kickaround. Let's do it. Welcome on in, Long Balls here on Morning Kickaround, leading off our show here on Wednesday, February 4th. The next installment of labor negotiations between the USLPA and the league office is set to happen today. In the negotiations, the labor side is usually often the louder side, and it's follows form that the league largely stays quiet in these sort of matters. So interesting. Kind of their public address and public facing commentary. The USLPA put a post out on their social media with a quote that got the hackles up of some folks out there in American soccer. Should we see this quote being posted from the USLPA on their social media with a little bit of video from Deputy CEO and Chief Real Estate Officer of USL, Justin Papadakis.
That changed the whole paradigm, right? Right now, kind of viewed as expenses. Soon they're going to be viewed as assets. And so that has a trickle-down effect in a big way, because once our clubs start looking at them as such, you're able to underwrite a significantly higher investment into their development.
And there you see it on the page there. Players aren't line items. That quote from Justin Papadakis, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, obviously he's trying to paint this as a good thing, right? That players become assets, and that's the way that clubs can think about them. I mean, this is the way the world of soccer works, Rob. I mean, we're seeing Major League Soccer make moves specifically towards the idea that their players are assets and they need to better leverage their assets in order to engage with the business of soccer around the world. Why is MLS switching its calendar, Rob? Why is MLS changing its calendar?
They want to be in the global transfer market.
They want to be better set, better positioned to sell and buy players in the global transfer market. Absolutely. So what Justin Papadakis is selling to whoever he was presenting to in this situation, and I think the context of this is this was one of the many presentations Justin's been giving to sell these communities on bringing professional soccer to their backyards and investing in the game, right? And obviously, I mean, this may have also been a plea to potential investors, right? Owners of clubs, of franchises in the USL. And he's not saying anything wrong. But from a USL Players Association perspective, stripping the humanity of the players to think of them only as assets is obviously that's a string they can pull when it comes to the PR nature of these negotiations, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that is obviously when you go into the expenses, the money in, the money out of any business, labor is one of the money out category. But to say that in those, I guess, very business terms, I guess, is tricky PR, because most of the commentary I saw in rebuttal is he's not wrong, but saying that out loud at this moment is a difficult thing to hear, especially if you're trying to promote, human, basic human or professional standards at that lower level. Like, everyone deserves nice housing and some healthcare and stuff like that.
Well,
but then to say, like, does that line item need healthcare?
This is the issue of the humanity of the people that are doing the work to sell your product. You do not have a team. You cannot sell tickets. You cannot sell hot dogs and beer if you don't have a team. And your team is made up of people, and those people obviously have needs, right? And should be respected. And that's obviously the USLPA's message. This is another example of an executive at the USL, while these negotiations are going on, talking about us like we're not people. And I get it from the USLPA side of it. And I don't blame them for utilizing this message. But I think if you have any sort of understanding of the nature of the sport, and the players certainly know this, right? The players have to understand this. When you engage in this profession, this is what happens. And I mean, I hate to say that, like, it's a matter of fact way of saying suck it up, players, but I don't mean they shouldn't get health care. I just mean in this regard, what Papadakis is saying is actually, again, a selling point for the future of USL, because that's the way things operate. Now, you can be angry at the system, right? You can be angry at the structures, and oftentimes we talk about this, right? I don't love the way we talk about player sales and transfers in our game, Rob.
Commodities.
It makes people feel like, it makes people feel like cattle. It's I'm not going to say a certain word that kind of it evokes, but it does. It evokes some human beings owned by people. And obviously that's not exactly what's happening here, right? They are, in some cases, they are rewarded very handsomely for their efforts. But again, I guess what I'm saying is nobody is covered in glory with this particular situation. And again, USLPA going to their socials to highlight something said by an executive not meant for public consumption, twisting it into players aren't line items, treat us with respect, is fair game. But we have to be very careful not to indict Papadakis for saying what any soccer executive would say in that situation.
Be interesting to see if today's labor negotiation meeting is gone like the many others without any resolution. We are just over a month from USL Championships opening weekend. So we'll see how this situation plays out, as you imagine the intensity only ramps up and the tactics used become more desperate as those days to kickoff get smaller and smaller as we go into the 2026 soccer season. All right, let's move on to our next story here on our long balls here on Wednesday. Okay, about 3 months ago, we made one of our most popular videos about the unanswered question for USL, as they had at the time presented the grand plans of both a D1 and a pro-rel system to come. There's about 10 questions we asked at that time. Some have been answered, some not. So with that said, we'll lead in with our first question. When will the first division and promotion and relegation happen?
Yeah, so this is a screenshot from the video that we did, which you can still watch. It's still the top video on the channel page. If you look for Morning Kickaround, we scripted this out because we were curious about these questions. And by the way, included in that video 3 months ago is the response we received from USL when we put these questions to them. We didn't say, let's ask these questions and talk about how there's no answers. We wanted to go to USL and say, what answers do you have for us about this stuff? And they had none. They said, we have no updates at this time. We do have updates now. Now, they didn't reach out to us directly to give us updates, but they did publish some updates. Robbie, you made a good point, though. You made a good point. It is interesting. Now, there's a little bit of public-facing activity in regards to Paul McDonough speaking to the press. I've reached out. I've gotten no response when asking for Paul McDonough or Tony Scholes, who's not really on the job until the summer. Flat out ignored to this point, which I'm a little disappointed about, to be honest with you. At least to say, for USL to say, we can't make those people available to you, even though I know Paul McDonough has talked to people. He talked to Paul Tenorio in the piece that dropped when they made their most recent announcement. But Rob made a good point. There's been no press conference, right? There's been no video call with journalists who might be interested. The narrative is so tightly controlled that it makes you wonder about the way they're doing this. I'm just saying it's going to invite questions. So let's address the questions that we put up in the video and where we are now. When will it happen, Rob?
Well, we do have the answer to that. It looks like the Division 1, the USL Premier, is set to start in 2028. As far as the promotion and relegation aspect on that, I don't think we have anything concrete just yet.
No, we absolutely do not. As you said, 2028. It identified in the most recent update. I will remind you that when they made the original announcement, they were a little more wishy-washy and said 2027, 28. So I think it's pretty clear that they threw that out, hoping they could be aggressive and maybe get things together for 2027. Went, well, actually, no, we're not going to get there. Let's kick it back a year. So now it's 2028. What about number 2 here?
How many clubs will be in each of these new divisions? Specifically, we do have an answer for the top 2.
Yes, we do. 20 and 20 is what they told us. Now, that's full build out. Eventually, long term is what they described it for Division 1, right? And we know, and the PLS will be involved in these questions too, but we know via the PLS, got to have 12 in year 1, got to have 14 by year 3, and then from there, whatever you want to do. It doesn't say you have to get to 20, but their target is 20. Now, again, when we ask the question, it feels like we should be able to give a firm answer, but we kind of can't. Not at least for the first division in terms of when it will have 20 teams, Rob. We know they want to have 20 teams, but when exactly will it have 20 teams? That's still up in the air.
Third question, how many teams are going to go up and down in this system?
No answers. Hints in the direction, via Paul Tenorio's piece at The Athletic, that it could be a very small number. It could be 2 and 2, and then eventually it'll be 3 and 3. But as we said, if you're populating a first division up to 20 teams over the long term, when you're not going to have that initially, then what you're talking about is probably promoting teams as they're ready into the first division until you get to 20, and then enacting what will be your permanent approach to pro-rel. That is what I would guess. And I'm sure that they are still knocking around ideas on what that actually looks like, Rob.
And this is the sort of thing that a press conference or an open call to journalists, they said controlled narrative. You ask a handful of reporters, they're going to poke some holes and maybe find some Swiss cheese elements to this. But we move on. Next question we pose to USL: what exactly is the process for clubs that win promotion but don't meet PLS standards?
There's no answer to this, right? This is not addressed as of yet, right? This is not addressed as of yet. That doesn't mean they don't have some sort of idea of what they will do with this. Again, it doesn't mean that there won't be waivers either given to clubs who are promoted. How strict U.S. Soccer is on those PLS when it comes to promotion and relegation is very much at the heart of all of this. Right? If there's not going to be either a revocation of all of the PLS or a refinement or a revision of the PLS that lets teams with 10,000 seat stadiums or 7,500 seat stadiums or that play in a 250,000 person metropolitan market or whatever it might be. Again, you have time zone requirements. Like if those things that directly impact the sanctioning of a league are not fully revised or fully revoked, then there will have to be waivers given, is what we presume. And again, that's kind of at the heart of all of this, true, right? Is USL actively working with US Soccer on the professional league standards?
That's one of the biggest assumptions. I think we're all assuming that they are, but this is amongst the things that I would ask if I was on a conference call with Papadakis or any of the other USL officials, is what is the communication? What is the going back and forth between you and the federation? Like, because without this, we don't know how realistic any of this really is if there isn't a conversation happening between those entities.
Absolutely. And I know lots of people would say, oh, the PLS were written to benefit MLS and they should be tossed out. Okay, that's your idea of what should happen. We don't know what's going to happen. Billy Bob asking a question that immediately comes to mind for me: has U.S. Soccer said anything yet? The answer is no. Now, they haven't said they're going to sanction or not going to sanction, which I don't know if that means there's an application process happening. Again, what is the back and forth? Just to have USL say, we have reached out to US Soccer and we are engaged in conversations around our plans to launch a first division and promotion and relegation would be something. It wouldn't be detail. We would still have a lot of unanswered questions, but it would be something. We would at least know that they're doing a thing everybody is asking about. And as of yet, we have no reason to think that's happening because they haven't said anything. And I don't know what US Soccer's responsibility here is. Let's talk this out a bit, Rob. Should US Soccer say internally, well, we can't say anything until they say something, right? Because USL's made a lot of noise and US Soccer has a role to play in this process. And yet they haven't put out a statement that says, well, you know what? I think maybe they did. Maybe they put out a very cursory statement that said something about acknowledging USL's plans here. I think they did it at the time when we go back to the original announcement, which was what, February of 2025. We're a year into this now. So, but I don't believe we've had one since then, right? We haven't had anything since then about, what the plan might be for US Soccer. Again, US Soccer said they welcome the innovation.
Yeah,
That's
I was going to say,
got.
I remember there was, when the announcements first came out, I think the only thing I've really heard is they're open to it or they'll welcome conversation. But I don't think there's been any firm, like, yes, USL's come to us and where's some problems we have, but we're working through them. There's been nothing like that. And this is almost a non-starter. This whole thing, we're all assuming that, of course, that they'll massage the PLS or at least give waivers of this and that. But we really just don't know. Just a boilerplate statement saying we are talking to each other would satisfy a lot in my mind when it comes to this question. Next up, unanswered questions, parachute payments. So one of the big issues with Pro-Rel, teams go down, money goes down. Will relegated teams receive financial support from them and adjust parachute payments to go into the championship opening?
So the thing about this question is it may not be necessarily germane in a real sense, because USL isn't driving a ton of outside money anyway. In fact, you'll find people who tell you the way USL makes its money is off of expansion fees, more or less, right? That's the way the money comes into the corporate entity that is USL. Parachute payments largely come from broadcast rights, which is something you see in England. There's also a very distinct possibility that, yes, there could be a significant increase in expenses when you go up, but when you go down, you may not actually have that much difference. It may not be a big drop in your revenue, depending on how fans respond. And I think there is something to be said for just, we don't know exactly what that looks like. You know, if a club decides to go down, or if a club gets relegated rather, and goes down a division, will fans walk away from the team? Will corporate money dry up? Whatever it is that there are the revenue streams for USL clubs, which again aren't really tied into television revenue, will they dry up? I don't know that we know that for sure. I mean, there are examples of self-relegating clubs that have mostly been okay, and we haven't heard of any significant issues financially, like, say, the Richmond Kickers. It's probably more the other way, right? Clubs were probably going to need more help when they go up and take on bigger travel costs and things like that.
Moving on to our next unanswered question. This is a sticky one. Is this an open system or just a pro-rel system within one company? Territorial rights. Will those rights remain in place after the implementation of promotion relegation? So if a team moves up and they're in that territory, what happens then?
Yeah, I mean, there's no territorial rights outside of USL. USL can have their own internal territorial rights, meaning if there's a club in a town, you can't just walk into that town and start a new club. Number one, USL has to approve your franchise. So you can't do that without their approval. And if they think that you're going to cannibalize the team that already exists in that market, whatever the size of that market is, they're not going to authorize your club. But there is something to be said for the idea that pro-rel is, or at least pro-rel moves in the direction of an open system. This cannot be an open system because it's one league or one league structure within the wider picture of American soccer. They're not tied into MLS, and they're not tied into USL having, or US Soccer rather, having a pyramid. So would there be an opportunity for, say, a USL 2 team in a given market? Because with USL 2, if you're talking about summer amateur teams, you're talking about a much lower level of entry. You're not really threatening the commercial opportunities for a professional club in the same area. But if that USL team decides it wants to go pro, and they suddenly want to go USL 1, and they say to the league, hey, we want to go pro, we want to engage in this pyramid, we want to go up, we want to be a first division team one day, how will USL handle that? I think those are still kind of, even though I don't think they're the most important questions, it is a question.
Once the system is in place, will new clubs have to enter at the bottom of the pyramid in League One?
Yeah, that's a good one. This I see the chat is talking about this too, right? Can you buy your way into Division One? I do think that we got an answer, a little bit of an answer in some of what was reported by Paul Tenorio. I don't think it was in the league's release or the league's information per their website, but I do think it said that this was going to be a combination of teams moving from the championship and expansion teams, Rob. So at least initially, when they populate Division One, it sounds like USL is open to the idea that you just buy your way in, and then you start engaging with the pyramid.
And then waivers. How many PLS waivers is USL expecting to request from the federation?
This is maybe a little out of order because we probably should address this when we asked the question of whether they're engaged with US Soccer on PLS. This is unknowable. This is just unknowable, right? This is unknowable until they get to the point of, here are the teams that we want to launch first division with. Here are the teams that we want in the second division. Here are their stadiums. Here are their marketplaces. Here are their whatever the details are, right? Moving these chess pieces around and trying to figure out what exactly it looks like is probably not done yet, especially if they are imagining that they will find new expansion franchises to populate their first division. That you can't know what that looks like yet. We don't know what their stadiums are like. We don't know what again, their owners have to have a certain level of capital in order to meet the PLS, all of those things.
So our final unanswered question, the Division One application process, how many clubs have applied so far. And we haven't actually heard from the league who's applied, but through parsing through what clubs have stated and released, we do have a cursory list of a handful of teams.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that again, USL controlling the narrative on steps forward from the original announcement back in February of last year to where we are now. And yet again, because the clubs are independent, right? Their franchises operating within USL, but they're independent from the league in terms of messaging. There are clubs who have said, we want to be first division. We've applied for first division. And, even the idea that there's an application process, right? And is that something like, is USL going to be, again, vetting clubs in order to be first division, or are they kind of going to be looking around going, well, we need a club over there. We better build that team up, or we better find some way to make that team first division or push them in that direction. I think is interesting. So which clubs do we have, Rob?
So we have 4, I believe we have confirmed: Louisville, Pittsburgh, North Carolina FC, and Sporting Jacks. And a couple others that have verbally expressed interest, including Detroit, Sacramento, and Rhode Island. And then there's a couple others not listed that meet stadium requirements that we're assuming.
Yeah, I don't think we can mention them. I do think that Sporting Jacks is interesting only because they haven't played yet, right? That's a new team, and they're already like, we're going to go D1, and that's okay. All right. I mean, I see you over there, and obviously Jacksonville's a big city, so that part of it they have no problem with, but there are some things to be determined there. And again, in terms of the clubs making their statements, that is as much to paint themselves as big time and, maybe capture attention within their marketplaces as anything else, right? It's just sort of good business to say, we want to be the biggest team we could possibly be and be in the top division that USL is launching.
So about a year after the original announcement of Division 1 for USL and then the subsequent announcement of promotion relegation, of our list of 10 questions, answers we have now at this stage, I think we're at about 1.5 out of 10 here, Jason.
Yeah, it's something like that. We haven't made a ton of progress in a year, but there's, it's a slow walk, Rob, I guess.
So we will follow this story and try to get as many answers as possible as we continue along here on our path to dot the map of the ever-changing American soccer landscape. Thank you, Mr. Bob, for the donation. And as we go, feel free to hit subscribe, become a member, and help support Morning Kickaround. Our guest is waiting in the wings, so let's get to it. Today's hot topic coming up here with our guest here on Morning Kickaround. Morning. On today's hot topic, we welcome the return of Concacaf Champions Cup, and to get the details on the 2026 edition and what the future may hold for this competition, we welcome in John Arnold, expert in North American soccer, and you might know him from his work getting Concacaf. Welcome in, John. Thank you for joining us here.
Hey, good morning, guys. Always good to be back. Always good to have the Concacaf Champions Cup back.
Yeah. It feels like we're back. I mean, again, I
Real
keep
soccer.
noting this, John, that this is the last time it's going to be like this for the American, for MLS clubs that are participating in this thing. Obviously, there are other things going on besides just MLS participating in the Concacaf Champions Cup, but with the calendar switch coming in 2027. This is kind of still an odd situation, or this feels a little odd. Give us a sense of where we are with the Concacaf Champions Cup. I know we had games last night in the first round, and the general vibes around the tournament this year.
I mean, I think that in general, the Concacaf Champions Cup will be as strong as the competition becomes. And, I think we've seen the Seattle Sounders win the trophy. We've seen MLS teams reach the final in the last 2 years. But overall, when you look, it's 19 of 20 of the last champions have been from Liga MX. And so I think that, you're always kind of going into this tournament with this, well, could somebody else break through? Is something different going to happen? Will this be the year? And sort of until that becomes something that regularly happens, I think you're always going to be in this boat. And as you mentioned, like maybe things shift too wildly before then for us to even look at this as the same era, right? There's chatter we might get into like, hey, could MLS and be in Libertadores and Liga MX teams be back in Libertadores? What would that do to the landscape? But for right now, I think that you have an exciting tournament ahead of you. You have an interesting competition, and last night showed it with some of the games and some of the results. I mean, we're only 3 games down, and there was already, I think, a jaw dropper with San Diego coming. I think it was 1-0 Pumas, then it was 1-1 in like the 75th minute, and all of a sudden San Diego takes a 4-1 advantage to Mexico City. These are things that you say, well, we didn't think that was going to happen even 2-3 years ago. The series isn't over, that tie isn't over, but when an MLS team that's only existed for 365 days on the field is competing with a grande of Mexico, I think you can say, oh, well, this could be a competition that will be worth watching, that will be interesting, and might produce more surprises than what you've seen as the end result 19 of 20 times, which is a big Mexican club lifts the trophy.
Yeah, big 4-1 win for San Diego in their debut in the competition. Maybe undersold the impact, the quick impact that San Diego's had on the field as a team here. Obviously, this is a newish format with it being a knockout. It's a 2-legged first round. How have you enjoyed it as a knockout tournament rather than the previous iteration as a league?
Yeah, I mean, I think the groups needed to go. And one of the sort of balances as well as we talk big picture format is, well, what do you do with the Central American and Caribbean teams? Because they are part of the Concacaf region. There are very proud teams with great histories. Last night we saw Olimpia, a Honduran team that made the semifinals in 2020. That's the last time a Central American or Caribbean team was able to make it that far. But we have seen surprises in this tournament. And of course, those teams are part of the region. And of course, they need to be in this competition. But how do they get there? What's the qualification like? Now CONCACAF has these split tournaments. I would say that like the actual format of the Concacaf Champions Cup is way better than it was when there were groups. The straight knockout was fun. Now you've got the buys and all that stuff. That it's fine. But I think that the Central American Cup and the Caribbean Cup in one way can be seen as a good thing. All these Central American teams that like to, Liga in Costa Rica wants to prove that it's better than Municipal in Guatemala. And now they have a tournament where they can do that. That's not the CCC. But at the same time, like you really cut, not access because there's still the same number of teams, but it's a much longer road. It's much harder for some of these teams, I think, to really believe that they can compete, that they could make a semifinal run like Olimpia did in 2020, or lift the trophy like Saprissa did much farther back, right? So it's tough because right now, like the competitive reality is that these teams are not going to win the trophy, but their history is that they did lift it. I mean, look, like even Europe has the same problem where you had these greats, and could a Romanian team ever win the UEFA Champions League again? I don't think so. Not unless things change radically. That's how it is, right? With Costa Ricans, with teams from Suriname who have won before, but they're still part of the region. They still have proud soccer. They still matter. So how do you kind of mash them together, and what can the region do to sort of spur competition in those sub-regions? I think is to me as important for the future of this competition, if it has one, as how do we get Mexico and MLS teams clashing against each other in these games that we all want to see.
Yeah, when you obviously, when you edge the tournament more towards MLS versus Liga MX, then you're just reinforcing the power structures that already exist, and you're not doing enough to maybe allow those teams from Central America, the Caribbean, to make themselves known at the later stages of the tournament, which is the only way that we're gonna, see them and hopefully they build them up. I think about Portugal, right? Can anybody really imagine a Portuguese team winning the Champions League again? Probably not gonna. And it happened in our lifetime, but it's probably completely out the window at this point. That's very interesting. The way this is playing out from an MLS perspective, and with obviously Leagues Cup having happened and then kind of been scaled back, and we're not quite sure what the future of that tournament is. Is the Champions Cup feeling again like the thing? I mean, it is the preeminent tournament. Let's not pretend like Leagues Cups has passed it, but I think there are people who would say, well, MLS and Liga MX tried to undercut it. How has that gone?
I mean, I think that even like something that like, look, I watch Morning Kickaround. I know the audience. I see the folks I see the ultras in the comments, right? We are people generally who love the lower division game, who love every level, the game being respected in all markets. You guys dot the map and you say, hey, you know, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Memphis, Tennessee are as important as New York and Mexico City. You know, even something like the Club World Cup that I think those types of fans do not like, I think has re-energized this tournament, because now the Concacaf Champions Cup not only gives you the trophy, bragging rights for being the best team, it gives you this entrance to a much expanded tournament that everyone wants to be part of, and that gives you a lot of money, right? So the fact that all of a sudden you have this big prize at the end, like Inter Miami is saying, we want to win CONCACAF this year. Yeah, sure, we'll win MLS Cup again. Yeah, sure, we'll win the Supporters Shield again, but like top prize, CONCACAF Champions Cup. Toluca in Mexico, Liga MX back-to-back champion. They're like, what's next? We got to win CONCACAF Champions Cup to get to the Club World Cup, because we want to prove that we matter, and we want to have bragging rights over Club America, who hasn't played a Club World Cup yet, or Chivas, who haven't played a Club World Cup yet. So I think that has added a bit of spice for even the bigger teams to really chase this, to try and push. You know, Inter Miami playing in the Club World Cup last time, but sort of admitting that, hey, we got that just because of our name and reputation and the money we spend. Now trying to do it on the field, I think, you know, that gives a lot of energy to these later rounds. And I do think, you know, I think teams want to win Leagues Cup, but the format of CONCACAF Champions Cup, where, look, great result for San Diego last night. You pencil them into the next round, but you know it's not going to be easy in the altitude, in the atmosphere, and playing a legendary Pumas team that's still kind of getting some of the pieces together as the transfer window is still open. So, look, with that home-and-home format, it's always going to be seen as more equitable than Leagues Cup, I think rightly so. And so the fact that, you know, and even the fact that Leagues Cup feeds into CONCACAF Champions Cup, right? Why are there so many MLS teams in this thing compared to Liga MX teams? Because MLS teams keep doing it in Leagues Cup. And so you kind of create that hierarchy where this does still feel to me like the preeminent tournament. And now there's that extra spice to try and really, really push and win the trophy.
Well, look, we're all sickos, right? We like seeing Mexican clubs have to go play in 10-degree weather in Hamilton, Ontario. We like the idea of San Diego thumping Pumas in San Diego, but having to go play to Mexico City, where it's going to be a completely different. Like, I enjoy that. Obviously, in the modern era, as the Champions League has become the dominant soccer property, as FIFA has moved into the Club World Cup and tried to expand that to get their own piece of that pie, I'm sure CONCACAF is constantly thinking about all of these things, John, and that is certainly interesting to me. And it's been mentioned. You mentioned it here. We had somebody else in the chat bring it up. I was reading the report, the supposed report on CONMEBOL offering something to Liga MX and MLS specifically in the Libertadores. How much truth or how much actual heat is there with that story? And is it even really a good idea in the big picture sense?
I think the thing is, like, whenever I did a short video on it, I posted the Ben Affleck exasperatedly smoking meme, because that's how I feel. I mean, we do have this conversation like every 3 weeks or something. You know, if you're in these spaces of Latin American soccer, Mexican soccer, you know, Mexican fans and Liga MX fans loved being in the Copa Libertadores, but, you know, I think it's viewed through rose-colored glasses, as so many things are. In soccer, in the world, right? The nostalgia of Tigres going to play River Plate at El Monumental, you know, clouds your memory that, like, Pumas had to travel to a random team that you can't even find anymore in Colombia, whatever, right? Like, there were these moments that were amazing and heady and beautiful and romantic, and then there were these moments where you're like, nobody's tuning in for that, right? I think that logistically, getting MLS teams and Mexican teams in the Libertadores is difficult. You know, if the Whitecaps, who by their sporting merit probably should qualify in whatever situation you set up, having made MLS Cup and made the CONCACAF Champions Cup final, it's 16 hours to fly to Buenos Aires, and you can't short. I mean, what are you going to do? Like, people kind of say, like, oh, but you could. Well, what about, you know, private jets and charters and et cetera, et cetera? No, it is far. It is very far from, and I was in Tijuana whenever some of the Brazilian teams were traveling there, and it really made the soccer worse. It's still fun. It's still a good tournament. So I think the idea of MLS teams and Liga MX teams in the Libertadores is great. It's fun. I get it. Logistically, I'm not sure how it works. I just don't know how you close that gap and still have soccer that matters both in the domestic league and in this regional competition. How do you cheapen? How do you not cheapen one or the other?
That's what it is for me, John. Like, oh, sorry, you said unless. Continue. You haven't thought.
Sorry, man. I want to hear what your idea is, because I think a lot of people have, unless you say, and CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, remember, in 2022, I believe, announced a collaboration where they said, we're going to have a tournament at one single site with 4 teams. 2 teams from CONCACAF, 2 teams from CONMEBOL. They're all going to go to the same place. They didn't say Miami, but probably Miami, right? Then Buenos Aires, whatever, right? You can put it wherever. But if you get everybody the same place and play it for a week, then you have but that's not Libertadores. That's not CONCACAF Champions Cup. So I think there's ways to bring these teams together and have these kind of romantic Messi versus River play, Messi at the Bombonera against Boca. But, Jason, I don't know exactly how you get the logistics right and still stay truthful to what a continental championship is.
Yeah, look, and I'm a realist. Like, I understand that everybody, whether you're in CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, whatever, they're all, and this has been the driving force behind MLS for the past 30 years, or at least once they kind of get out of there, we might fold any day period, which is, how do we, as a league, as a country, as a region, geographically locked out from playing against the biggest clubs in the world, or even the biggest clubs in our hemisphere, how do we figure out a way? And that's what Leagues Cup is, right? Leagues Cup is a way to try to break out of the restrictions that are placed on Mexican and American soccer by the geographical restrictions. But I'm also a romantic. And for me, this is a game that always has been sort of based on the region of the world you exist in. I don't want non-European teams playing in the Champions League. I don't know that I love the idea. I mean, obviously Mexico already participated, but I don't know if I love the idea of North American teams in Libertadores, because that's a South American competition. So, and if you give up your preeminent place, like, our top spot goes to the Concacaf Champions Cup, if you are now saying, well, actually, and I don't think that's how Mexico did it, right? It wasn't league winners that went to Libertadores. They were like a second tier of clubs that went to Libertadores.
And that's what I'm saying too. These rose-colored glasses where like you have this nostalgia of like, oh my goodness, the best teams, and it's like, Puebla played, with all respect to Puebla, fine, good team, whatever. Right. Like in that era, but like it was the top teams went to CONCACAF Champions Cup, and the teams after that in the table went to Libertadores. And I just think there are a lot of logistics. People forget too, like, man, I'm so glad it's not COVID, but like, hey, we had a pandemic where we all had to figure out like, how do we travel safely? And, there's been air disasters, and like, you can't just snap your fingers and say Messi's here unless that's all you want. If all you want is Messi to play in Libertadores, you can, hey, we got a special pink ball and it's going to come out and it's going to go in this group and these games are going to go in these, and you can do that. Is that the Libertadores? Not how we've come to know it. So I think, yes, you could kind of, if you legitimately want long-term MLS teams and Liga MX teams in Libertadores, I think you'd have to figure out something. If you just want Messi in there, you just want one tournament, you can make that happen. Would it be legitimate? Would it be fun? Probably not legitimate, probably a lot of fun. So, it kind of, pick your pleasure, I guess.
Yeah, maybe I'm just an old guy shaking my fist at the clouds that we're not going to do it the way we're supposed to do it, right? And that's the thing. Maybe we're not. Maybe we have to be adaptable. But they feel like there should be some lines that you don't cross, which is basically like handing a spot to a club because they happen to have a famous player or the most famous player. That doesn't seem right to me.
We talked about possible encroachments to the Libertadores and in the Leagues Cup, but what could be maybe some gas on the fire for this competition is Major League Soccer's thought and plan to change the calendar to the fall to spring side. So we like Concacaf Champions Cup in part because it is the sign of the season to come. Concacaf Champions Cup, and that means we're just a few weeks away from Major League Soccer returning. So with the plan to change to the fall to spring calendar, Major League Soccer would be in the middle of their season potentially at that point. Does that change the focus of Major League Soccer teams on this competition?
I think the calendar switch could help some, and I also think that things are already changing. If you watched the San Diego Pumas match last night, I think traditionally you've seen the Mexican clubs really be strong in that last 10, 15 minutes where their fitness is up, and last night it was the opposite. Like San Diego looked fresh. Their changes were fantastic. The fact that Vasquez and Maiton, the substitutes, both scored. They both helped set up other goals. That sort of refresh. And they talked about why aren't MLS teams able to compete? The depth. I think you're really seeing some things start to change, and some of that's credit to specifically what San Diego did, but some of it is a trend that we've seen, like with the Vancouver Whitecaps twice going to Mexico and winning. Columbus Crew, they went into Mexico. They didn't win the final, but they're able to get to the final, beating some very historic and prestigious teams. And I think you see the MLS teams are starting to get more depth. They're starting to have, so even with that calendar not being switched, I think the focus is there. The preparation is right. There's a blueprint. There's a model. How can you compete if you're an MLS team? And it's not always going to work. Best laid plans can go awry, but I think that overall MLS teams have done a good job figuring out how to get ready, how to get up to speed. And I think you see it bearing out, in the results. Obviously more teams will get involved here, but so far we got San Diego and it's looked good, Jason.
Yeah, let me ask you about the way, this is not necessarily related to international competition, but the way you think the calendar switch will impact the player market in North America. Because obviously you have Apertura Clausura, but you're still lined up in a way with Mexico you haven't been before.
Well, and one thing I wrote about that I think is really affecting the Mexican teams that played specifically last night, Tigres, America, and Pumas. One thing I wrote about on Getting Concacaf this week is you have this transfer window, and Mexico's already 4 weeks in, but like the biggest shifts are happening right now, and you're a quarter of the way through your short tournament, right? So these clubs feel like they're in this weird state of flux as they go into Concacaf Champions Cup. And yes, you've had rhythm, and yes, you've played 4 matches together, but all of a sudden, America doesn't have their best player in Alvaro Fidalgo in the midfield, and Alan Saint-Maximin leaves, so you're down a winger. They're down 2 starters from their normal squad, and then it's, you get chucked into the mix in Honduras, and they're able to get a win. Credit to them. Pumas, they get Uriel Antuna, who's going to be a starting player for them because they sold Jorge Rubalcaba to an MLS team, but he's not ready to go yet because he showed up 4 days ago. He doesn't, he's not ready. So I think that, yes, it will change with the calendar, maybe not as drastically as we'd like, but I think that MLS, one thing I've heard from ownership when I've spoken to MLS owners for years is we would do better business if the transfer, the transfer windows were more aligned with Europe, because right now you have to decide in the middle of your season in the summer, do we let this guy go or not? And it's going to tank our season. And Mexican clubs are sort of making that decision in the winter window. But I do think that the window switch, if everything stays the same, will help MLS teams even more. And listen, like I'm saying, hey, like MLS teams are getting better. I think people might hear me say the gap is closing between MLS and Liga MX. But again, 19 of the last 20 teams that have lifted the Concacaf Champions Cup have been from Mexico. So MLS does need that little help. They need those little boosts. And I think that the calendar can provide another little boost for those teams, right?
So before we let you go, thank you so much for filling us in on the Concacaf Champions Cup and the season that we're starting and what's perhaps to come. There's definitely some moving parts. But San Diego wins their debut in the competition 4-1. And one of the tropes of the competition is Mexican teams going home and overcoming big differences in aggregate. Does San Diego hold on in the second leg of this round against Pumas?
I think they will, because I think Pumas' attack is still sort of figuring out what it's going to be. Robert Morales had an amazing goal for Pumas, but then you kind of look in the rest of the game. What did they create? Jordan Carrillo, the winger who went to Europe and now he's back on loan with Pumas. He had a good league game, but I didn't think he was super relevant last night. So, Pumas have a lot of different players. Again, Antuna might be up and ready to run. I think San Diego will still get it done, partly because I think that, again, I didn't like how they handled the Irving Lozano situation. I didn't like how they handled some of the, things, the movements around that. But 4-1 win at home, you got to credit what Mikey Barras did and what he continues to do and what the whole organization is doing. So I think they will hold on, but, the messaging for them has to be all week. This thing isn't over, because we have seen many MLS teams have that advantage and then lose it in altitude, in a difficult place to play in the CEU, and against a team that is really good, that has talent. I mean, look, they scored 4 goals past Keylor Navas, right? It's not just some joker in there at goal. Like, Keylor is still playing well. He's still Keylor Navas, and they were able to do what they did. So, it bodes well. I think they'll hold on, but it's certainly not over.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely murder from the flanks for San Diego last night. John, before we let you go, we have a running bit. You say you check in on us, which means you might know about it. We have a running bit about pronunciation. Now, I'm not saying I'm great with all languages. Obviously, hablo español en casa, so I have a little bit of that. But Rob tries really hard, and I know he hates it. But tonight, I'm not going to ask him to say it. Tonight in Guatemala, we have a game. Monterrey is playing. Who are they playing against, John?
Shelaju. Sheila. Ooh.
So I'm not the only one.
A lot of times I'll go with they're the Super Chivos. They're from the Highlands. They don't get to play at home. They got a great home atmosphere, but their stadium isn't good enough for CONCACAF. They're trying to like totally renovate it, so that'll be fixed in the future. But they play like 3.5 hours. But look, like a lot of times when we've seen these tournaments in the past, like 3 hours away, there's nobody there. This will be full. I mean, they really have. But
That's
yeah,
good.
it's the Guatemalan Highlands. It's different, so don't feel bad, Rob. It's not your traditional Spanish. You got a little, you got some elements in there that are not your Castellano. So it's all good, man. But go with Super Chivos. That's easy to say.
There you go.
The
See,
big
I
goats,
wasn't trying to pick on him.
goats.
I was asking an expert, like, what's our move here? John knows. John knows.
I know you think about this more than I do, Jason, but it's like it's constant. Like, well, do I say Monterrey or do I say Monterrey? Like, do I say Cruz Azul or Cruz Azul? Like,
man.
And then, but either way you go, and I know you know this. Either way you go, there's people in the comments that are like, why is he saying it weird, or why didn't he say it?
Yeah.
Hey, we're all trying our best, Rob. So that's all we can ask.
Absolutely.
John, I appreciate it. So we got a guest sticking up for us. Thank you so much for sticking up for us and then telling us all about the Concacaf Champions Cup. Outside of getting Concacaf your Substack, is there anywhere else the folks can find your work?
Yeah, I do short vertical videos on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, which you can find on John Arnold FC. I was going to spell my name, but I guess it's right there, unlike our normal radio conversations, Jason. And, I do some shorts, and then I've got a long-form horizontal video travel series, guides to the World Cup cities in Mexico. The first one is in Guadalajara. It's out on that YouTube page. The second one, I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it'll be out at the end of February. I'll be traveling. Actually, people will probably be able to figure out pretty easily. But I'll be traveling next week to see some matches and also to do some more, and then hopefully we'll close out Mexico. And so people can check that out as well. If you're headed to Mexico for any matches, the focus is World Cup. But if you're going for any games, show you where to eat beforehand, how to get into the stadium, how to get home, what neighborhood to stay in, what to eat afterwards, and if you want to have to drink it too as well, I've got you covered. So
John's got you on like phrases you can use to get the right stuff. That's always good. Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Wonderful resource there. Thank you so much to John. And thank you everyone for chiming in and participating in that conversation in the comments. Thank you so much for that. Thank you to Bob. If we didn't say thank you to Bob for his contribution, another $10 from Bob. You can be like Bob as well. You can hit that button underneath to give us a little bit of money, but for no cost at all, you can subscribe or you can just tell your friend about Morning Kickaround.
Okay. Can I say we've been challenged by your guy Luke? We've been challenged. Now, first of all, I stuck up for you because he said I was picking on you. I wasn't picking on you. I was trying to figure it out. John would know better than me. I wasn't saying I knew how to pronounce it. I was saying, let's get John Arnold, CONCACAF expert, to tell us how to pronounce it. And even he was like, well, just say Super Chivos. Luke says, I'll donate $5 if any of us can pronounce whatever that is he just wrote. There's Y's and W's and T's and H's, and I don't know, Rob. Like if you throw a Welsh thing at me, I'm worse than you. I have no concept of how to say anything in Welsh.
So I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to call it Aberystwyth Town.
Aberystwyth. Okay. I would say I would say I honestly don't know, man. A Aberystwy? I have no idea. Aberystwy.
All right. Who is the closest there, Luke? You're gonna. I said Aberystwyth, and you said something completely different from that. I think you were getting stuck on a couple of different consonants.
Can I chime in and give a shot?
Sure, let's go. You want to put it back up on the screen? Do you need it, Jenny? All right, there it is. Jenny, give it a shot.
Yeah, please. Aberystwyth?
Aberystwyth.
I don't know. That's
okay.
Close.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I think we probably all butchered that. I think we all butchered it. So anyway, thanks to John.
And Luke's gonna keep us hanging and not reveal who was the closest there. But if we ever want to dig into the complicated pronunciations of Welsh towns and teams, Luke Zagorski in the chat is the resource for that. We got one more segment to go. We're gonna come right back with today's big question here on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Our big question to wrap up our day here on Wednesday with the news in the ether of one James Rodriguez, Colombian international, on the plane saying, here we go, rumored and linked heavily with Minnesota United. Quick question. Do you think James Rodriguez is a good signing for the Loons?
Depends on the money. This is always the cop-out. Depends on the money. Now, he's not going to be a DP player, but it is going to be something, right? This guy bounces around on 6-month contracts, like he's one of those roving contractors that comes to your house and says, I can do your roof. Yeah, I mean, most people are, maybe those people are shady. I don't know that James Rodriguez is trying to be shady, and he's certainly good looking. We know he's a talented footballer, but at this point, like, I just don't know what he's delivering. I want it to happen because it'd be intriguing and interesting. And my joke over on Blue Sky was that you now have to call him Hot Dish Rodriguez instead of James Rodriguez. That's all I care about, Rob. Just bring me entertainment, and I think this would be entertaining.
Yeah, he's definitely, you definitely could categorize him as a journeyman. He hasn't been at a team for more than a single season since 2019. And his residency or his time at Everton, a bit of a fever dream for Everton fans. I don't think that there was ever any fans in the stadium for him to be an Everton player. So arguably one of the most talented players to ever don the colors, never seen by fans.
Yeah,
it's wild. Which is interesting.
It's wild that the modern history of Everton Football Club somehow includes James Rodriguez and Carlo Ancelotti. What? Like what?
Yeah, the Real Madrid legend and the current Brazilian coach spent time on the sidelines of Everton. That definitely is a random trivia question, but for context, James Rodriguez out of contract. His last team was León in Mexico. That concluded in December, so he hasn't been on a team for over a month. And then prior to that, he was on Rayo Vallecano, then Sao Paulo, Olympiacos, Al Rayyan, and then Everton, and then Real Madrid.
This man is dotting the map all by himself. Like, that maybe he's just got a wanderlust. Like, maybe James Rodriguez it's like, you know what? I've always wanted to visit Greece. I'll just sign with Olympiacos for a little while. I've always wanted to go to Mexico. I'll sign with León and check out Mexico and eat Mexican food. Who knows? He could just be, getting the cultural flavor of all of those places. And that's why he's so happy just to bounce around and sign short contracts.
That's a good gig if you can get it. If you can definitely tour the world getting paid to be a professional soccer player. That's wild. And we haven't really heard anything about him being a bad locker room presence or anything. I mean, is he being tossed aside just because of him being a bad teammate? I haven't heard anything about that. Maybe his wages got too high too early, and so while teams like having him in the side, maybe he's a little expensive. It looks like, but going back to the job if you can get it. So I am interviewing for full-time jobs right now, and I was posed a question: if money was no issue, what would you do? And I said I would be a soccer anthropologist. I would, wherever my fancy took me, I would go to that place, go see games and dig in and learn all about the culture and the history of that place through their soccer. Yeah. And that would be interesting. Maybe that is what James is doing. He is becoming a soccer anthropologist.
Yeah, you just want to be Anthony Bourdain for soccer, which everybody, how many times somebody has been in a boardroom or talking to a media company or somebody and been like, oh, we're going to do no reservations for soccer. It's going to be amazing. And I would support you in that endeavor, Rob. I would want to do something very similar. Like, yes, I'm interested in all that stuff. Maybe that is what's going on with James. I mean, Minnesota is an interesting choice. Like, it's not the obvious one. I do obviously think it's an interesting place. It's also an interesting moment for James to be considering Minnesota. I mean, let's not pretend like the real world doesn't have some impact. In fact, we didn't get into it, and it was, we kind of had to be careful with it on the radio show that I do with Eric Winalda, but we've heard that Minnesota United has struggled to sign a couple of players because those players have looked at the situation in Minnesota and in the country and been like, no, I don't think so. Why would I put myself in that environment right now? And James apparently, again, none of this is done. Tom Boger's reporting is usually solid, so we trust that there's something going on here. And I did see a picture that James posted to his social media of him on an airplane doing whatever. I don't know, but it didn't say he was going to Minnesota, but people are connecting dots.
Yeah, it's just kind of like speaks to the world that's a little bit kind of just confusing and jarring with who's perceiving what kind of reality, because I think this Hamas news came like 24 hours after that article about Minnesota not getting players, and then them to now get their biggest name player linked to them is kind of a mind swirl there a little bit. But going back just a step in the show regarding that pronunciation conversation, it looks like Luke is awarding producer Jenny, with the $5 for her attempt at Aberystwyth Town, I believe is generally.
Wait, hold on. She won, and you're still saying it like it's like your version is right, is correct? That's not what Luke is saying. He said you got it wrong, and Jenny was closest.
I'm reiterating the attempt of what we're talking about here. I'm framing the competition. I'm not trying to usurp Jenny's near excellent pronunciation. And then also a thank you to Wes. He has gifted a couple memberships here. It looks like we have a new member on board. Todd, welcome aboard, and looking forward to seeing your introduction and your contributions on the Morning Kickaround Discord server and your comments on these live shows. And set a month reminder to re-up that, because these memberships that are gifts, 1 month only.
Yeah. Shout out to Wes. He says he's got to run off. So shout out to Wes for that. We just did the idea of Anthony Bourdain, RIP, going around and experiencing soccer culture, or somebody doing it in that vein brings up some interesting ideas and thoughts. Bourdain quaffing wine in the San Siro with the Ultras. Can you quaff wine if you're in the Curva? I don't think you can. I don't think you can quaff wine and be an Ultra in the San Siro. You can quaff wine in the box, but you can't quaff wine with the Ultras. I also, this did remind me though, Rob, and I don't have the video. I wish I did. I wish I had prepared it. But Willem Dafoe spotted at the La Bombonera in Buenos Aires supporting Boca Juniors. I guess he's doing some movie stuff down there, and they got him out, and he's gets spotted, and the fans are chanting something about the goblin. The goblin is Boca or something like that, which is great.
He looked so chuffed when some of those shots of him. He looked so like over the moon to be there, and people seem to be treating him really good there. And when you were talking about quaffing wine at the San Siro, I was just thinking about like almost like a Jackass sort of a skit of a guy with like a beret and like a nice white scarf with like a big glass of red wine, just being like absolutely throttled and jostled in the midst of the super supporters. Be a funny thing to see.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's some comedy there. But yeah, James Rodriguez in Minnesota will be fascinating. I kind of hope it happens. I don't know that he would be the most effective player. And I'll go back to what we had earlier, the comment about the 6-month contract at the beginning of the season, when that doesn't, that just takes you to the summer. It's pretty clear that if James is signing a short-term contract like that, Minnesota's not convinced that he could be a player for them all year long, or he just cares about getting ready and playing games ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah, he did something similar 2 years ago. I mean, obviously he's been doing these short contracts for a few years now, but ahead of Copa America 2024, he got himself back into shape and had an excellent tournament. I think he was in the running for MVP of the Copa America 2024. But yeah, James Rodriguez, essentially a rental player potentially for Minnesota in this first half of the 2026 Major League Soccer season. We'll see if that self-proclaimed "here we go" goes into an official one as the days play out here. We should probably bring up Kickathon 2026 again before we get out of here. There we have it on screen, February 18th, Kickathon 2026. We're going to have guests, games, and a whole lot of fun and some fundraising, and in kind of a 3-hour show in an effort to raise some funds, have a whole lot of fun, bring more people under the tent, and kind of like set the platform for what we can accomplish as a show in 2026.
Yeah, I think we're gonna sort of boldly lay out some of what we want to do with this show and give you guys a sense of where we are in the growth of the I mean, this is without you guys, this doesn't exist. We can't keep going. We can't go to places and do live shows, which is absolutely part of the plan. You know, everywhere I go, I'm talking about Anthony Bourdain style soccer content. I want to do college game day style soccer content. And I don't want to do that with the U.S. men's national team or MLS. I want to do that in places like Portland, Maine, or Chattanooga, Tennessee, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, or, Lancaster, California, or wherever. Like, I want to do it in these places that aren't getting the same kind of attention as these major metropolitan areas with their MLS teams. And I think we can do that with a little bit more support and with some things that are happening behind the scenes. So this is going to be kind of our launching point. We could do a Kickstarter or GoFundMe or something like that. And I don't know, maybe that is something that we have to consider down the road. But we also want to just give you guys more opportunity to talk about the stuff you care about on this show, on this platform, and use that as a way to help get us to the next level. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly. Couldn't say it any better myself. Morning Kickaround's Kickathon 2026, February 18th, right here. Same place, same time, but with a much longer runtime, many more guests, and the addition of some games in the mix and some surprises, I'm sure, as well. All right, I think that does it for today's live stream. Be locked into the channel. We'll be posting stuff as we go, as always. And then for our new members, be on the lookout for the link to get on the Morning Kickaround Discord server. And we look forward to seeing your introductions and you dotting the map. And if there's anyone in that Discord server that hasn't put their coordinates in there, do so now, as our map is really filling out and it's starting to really look good.
Yeah, do that. Also, a quick reminder that Friday's episode is a countdown to kickoff for the New York Cosmos. We're going to be talking about their preseason and some things they got working over there. Very excited for that. And as always, Friday is a little bit of a free-for-all after the show. We get into dotting the map. We get into talking to the ultras and hopefully growing the channel.
All right. Until then, guys, everybody stay warm, stay safe, and enjoy your soccer. Here we go.